Contact center recruitment has become more complex than ever, with operators struggling to find the right agent profile. Now, this has been made even more challenging as consumer expectations have become extremely demanding of those servicing the front CX lines. Factor in the need to source more home-based employees than ever, and it's understandable why agent recruitment was cited as one of the biggest contact center challenges in the 2021 Front Office Omnibus Survey by Ryan Strategic Advisory. Today, to shed more light on the agent onboarding paradigm, the CX File speaks with Annelien Marcus, a contact center recruitment specialist based in the London area. Annelien explains the changes she has seen in this dynamic and what CX operators need to consider when sourcing the right talent to interact with their end users.
Well, the CX Files this week is really pleased to welcome Annelien Marcus. Annelien, it's great to have you on our podcast. Thanks for joining.
No, thanks for inviting me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And one of the things that we've been looking into a lot over the course of the past 12 months is really the shift in how the contact center or the CX industry has been best served in terms of human resources, in terms of frontline staff, in terms of team members. And it's quite significant because we're in, I think, really an ongoing period of disruption. But before we get into that, maybe could you tell us just a little bit about yourself, what you do, and what your role in the CX industry is from a broad perspective?
Oh, goodness me. I'm really old, so it's going to be a long story. I won't bore you. So I started recruitment 10 years ago. Somebody actually once said to me, I wouldn't make a great recruiter because I'm very hot-headed. And it's probably my South African heritage as well, but I've proven them wrong. I'm actually bloody fantastic at it, to be honest. But it's about 4 years ago that I started within the contact center or the customer contact recruitment field. And I must admit, that's where I found my little place in the world because I absolutely love this industry. It's all led by the customer experience and the customer service side of things as well. So for me, I've always been a sales through service kind of person anyway. So for me, I've really, really enjoyed this sector because I can speak to people on a human level without trying to be overly fancy. You know, when I did the medical side of recruitment, it was all very technical stuff and the lingo and things like that. But I found this to be where I belong. I have placed people within the temp as well as the permanent recruitment side of things. So, I've learned a lot and I'm going to keep going.
That's great to hear. And you mentioned being from South Africa, which it's worth noting, the number one offshore CX destination in the world for 2021, according to the Ryan Strategic Advisory 2021 Front Office BPO Omnibus Survey. That's just a little aside, had to put that in there.
I'm super duper proud of that too. So
well, no, and rightly so. So let's talk a little bit about the recruitment industry when it comes to CX team members. It's obviously been impacted tremendously over the course of the past 12, 13, 14 months. Based on your experience, what are the biggest differences in how you were sourcing agents for contact centers pre-pandemic? And how does it look now that we're moving into this almost a post-vaccine period?
Oh, goodness me. So I would say pre-pandemic, I've always been very lucky in that way. I tend to have people refer candidates through to me a lot, especially with the entry level roles. And I'm a big believer in using that CRM to my advantage as well. These people have already bought into me, so that's where I'm going to start first and foremost every time to find the next level or the next batch of staff that's needed. We've always used like social media. It was almost a hard sell every time for a job, not hard. Oh, I'm not saying this correctly. It's so frustrating. We had to almost convince somebody to take a job because of what they can offer. When nowadays it is so candidate led that people are applying left, right, and centre and they'll take any job. But I don't believe in just placing somebody in a job because it is a job to fill a hole, because they're not going to stay and they're not going to be happy. And at the end of the day, that's the ultimate success if they stay there long term or indefinitely. But it has certainly changed a lot. I mean, I used to use the all the CV sites a lot in the past, where we'd have to go and look for people. Where now they really don't find me. I can't tell you how many people approach me on LinkedIn on a daily basis, asking me for help as well.
That's really interesting when you say that now it's much more candidate-led than it was pre-pandemic. And that raises a really interesting question about what your clients, so what the captive operators or the outsourcers are looking for in an agent. What are some of the most important qualifications or perhaps profile traits that your clients in 2021 value when they're looking for a prospective team member to come join their CX operation?
Oh, I would say emotional matureness. That's quite a very, very important one. I believe that's what I always look for in somebody, purely because that means that they can take some feedback, whether it's good or bad. Because not many people like to get bad feedback. Well, I'm a great believer you can learn something from it, It's not a nice feeling, but take something away from it. Somebody that have got that transferable skills, because you've got a lot of people coming from all sorts of backgrounds now trying to apply for work from home or contact center stuff because they might not be in a place to go return to work as yet, so that's one of the very important things, for us in the past. We used to have specific, if a client asks for a customer service agent, you don't necessarily going to give them a salesperson, or if they're going to ask for somebody that's got retentions experience, you're not going to give them a salesperson, or complaints. You would never put a salesperson in a complaints role purely because they're so hot-headed. They will probably end up swearing at the clients or the customers, So you don't want that kind of situation either. Now they're looking for somebody that's got a little bit more rounded, isn't it? So that if they're going to go into a BPO, they must be able to deal with different situations on a daily basis. Make sense?
Oh, no, it makes total sense. And I'd be really interested in knowing from you the extent to which you're being asked to try and find candidates that have potentially previous home working experience, considering how much of a shift to virtual delivery we've seen the past year or so.
Oh, see, if you said to me, find me somebody with work from home experience 2 years ago, that would have been a really tough thing to do. Really tough. And it was such I would say 99% of clients out there would have said, no, it would have to come into an office. And it would have been a challenge. I think we've now realised, obviously, that this is a possibility. You can trust people to do the job in hand. And we are looking to more transferable skills again, because just because somebody has worked in a shop and their customer service is fantastic and they've gone into a shop on a daily basis doesn't mean that they can't sit at home, answer a phone and work behind a computer all day long. So it's asking people human questions, That's how I determine whether they're going to be a good fit or not. Silly little things like, do you get up in the mornings and 5 minutes before you have to be in front of your computer? Or are you kind of person that gets up an hour early, have breakfast, play with the cat, do a load of washing, prepare yourself for the day. Because that's when when there's the kind of person that's just going to turn up because they have to turn up, or the kind of person that's actually going to be dedicated to do the role properly and focus on it.
How are you finding that? Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. How are you finding that prospective agents these days are enthusiastic towards working from home? Is this something that they're looking to do? Is it something that they see as something of value, or do they prefer to work in a center if possible?
Oh, it just differs from person to person, really does. My daughter, for instance, she works in a contact center, and she loved working through the pandemic from home because she can literally sit in her tracksuit bottoms on a daily basis, and loungewear, where as soon as she had to go back to the office about 2 months ago, she's just thrived, She's gotten a a salary increase, and she's now a team leader, and she's just done really, really well and loved being back in the office. Just getting dressed up again and brushing your hair and putting a bit of makeup on a daily basis. So it does differ. And I think it's also, again, personality traits. If you're the kind of person that are introverted and prefer your own company, that's one thing, but if you're also this kind of person that wants to be in the office, then it really, really does differ. And thank God we are all different, isn't it? So, that's what I would think.
So you talked a little bit about working with outsourcers in regards to finding talent. Obviously, the outsourcing side of the business is a big and a growing part of what the whole CX dynamic looks like. But there's also evidently a great deal of activity happening on the captive or the enterprise-owned contact centers. Are you finding that the priorities in terms of recruitment for the outsourcers or the BPOs is different from the captives, or are they roughly the same?
I think they're roughly the same at the end of the day. Which is, I would think it will probably work on the same level. And if I'm wrong, please somebody tell me otherwise. I would like to know, because I am one of those people. I take criticism really well, but I would think it's roughly the same. I really honestly do.
Interesting. And, you talked a little bit about social media. You talked a little bit about people reaching out to you on LinkedIn to potentially get hired. If you were going to be searching for the ideal agent, social media is certainly one avenue. What are some of the other avenues that you might try exploring?
I use Indeed. I do use that one. That's a good one to source good candidates from. But I think for me, social media is great. If it depends again what level you're looking at. If it's an entry level agent, then social media is usually a great place, i.e. Facebook. I have found many a customer service advisor via Facebook in the past, and I still belong to quite a few Facebook groups, countrywide that we can, source people from. LinkedIn is more for mid-management and up, to be honest with you. But the agents are getting really savvy, and I think a lot of people where they've never been on LinkedIn before have now started taking advantage of that avenue as well, because they now realise that that's where the hiring manager are hanging out.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned LinkedIn, because I've actually found over the past year and a half, I've been getting a lot more connection requests from people who are working on the front lines. And potentially it's just because they're looking to network, they're looking to grow in their careers as contact center or CX ambassadors. And I think it's a good way of them to potentially get some level of education from what's being talked about if you're a member of different LinkedIn groups and so forth. But I do see it as a positive element, because really it's bringing, I think, a potential new layer of professionalism to that front line.
Oh, 100%. And I think they're the key people to watch. They're the ones that's thinking outside the box. They're not too lazy to not do their homework, They sit in there and they're going on the webinars and they're trying to educate themselves a little bit more, and they're taking advantage of what is out there, And those are the kind of people that I would want to work with, because I know they're going to be, taking things forward rather than just wait for things to happen to them.
And that raises a really good point, because we're talking about the growth of the need for problem solvers, or people who are able to bring transferable skills into a frontline role. When you're doing interviews to try and assess a potential recruit, what are some of their objectives to when they're going for a contact center or a CX style role? Are they talking about maybe a traditional stopgap that we used to associate with these types of jobs, or are they actually looking to try and forge a career path starting from the front line and moving upward?
I think it is the latter. I think people have realised, don't get me wrong, I never realised what a career you can build in a contact centre until I started working in this industry, because I was ignorant. For me, it was, you thought this was it, that's just somebody answering the calls, and you never realise how far it can take it. But I think, people are seeing it, that it's not a call centre anymore, is it? That's what it is. We've had to educate people. It's not call centres any longer. It is a contact centre, and they are changing, and it's a different kind of beast altogether. I never realised what goes on behind the scenes. So I think people are taking it seriously and, building their careers out of it. I, for one, my daughter, when she got her first job, I helped her find that. I'm not going to lie, at 18, her first job coming out of school, and she's now even realised she's almost 21, and she's realised, Mum, that there is a potential there for her to really go all the way and take advantage of the skills that she can learn there and build a career on it. So I really do think that's how people now look at it. There was always a bit of a stigma attached to it, wasn't there, back in the day? Yeah. If you said, I work in a call centre, people used to go, oh, really? But now it's not at all anymore. I think it's a nice place to work.
You took the words out of my mouth. I remember a really good friend of mine in the industry made a comment to me one time, and he said, nobody sets out at the start of their career to get into the call center industry. You find yourself in it. But at the same time, I think once you found yourself in it, very few people actually want to leave because it's such a fun place to work. But I think you're touching on something. There's a difference now that you actually are getting younger people who've finished perhaps their A-levels or who have finished high school in North America, or potentially even individuals who might have worked in university in a contact center who've decided to stay on because they actually see that there is a career path that they can fulfill themselves with.
Oh, 100%. And usually it's like again, my daughter, using her as example, I always use her as an example. She started off with no qualification there whatsoever, and she's worked her way up, You can go in there with no education whatsoever. And how often do you see heads of contact centers, the CEOs, they worked as agents and worked their way up all over the years. So, you can achieve that if you want to. And I take my hat off. The young people nowadays, a lot of people don't give them the credit they do, but they work bloody hard, in this life. Our world is so expensive. We live in a social media world where everything is so visual, and you always want to keep up, and you want to have the best, and you want to, grow with the times, and etc. So the youngsters nowadays do really, really well. And, they want to work hard and they want to earn their money, and they can get in there and do it from the bottom upwards, then, hey, I hat off. Respect.
Absolutely. Respect indeed. So just to wrap up our series of questions, I would love to know what your thoughts are as we move towards what everyone's saying is going to be a more hybrid model, a structural amount of agents who are going to be in a contact center with a larger proportion of frontline ambassadors who are working from home. As we get into the midpoint of 2021 and into the future, that who knows what it's going to look like, but what would you counsel your clients in terms of what they need to be looking for in the agent of the future? What are some of the key characteristics that you would be looking for on behalf of your clients?
Oh, for me, it's always open communication skills. I mean, if you're not an open communicator, you will never survive it, that and open to learn, That's the most important thing, because most people can learn anything if they want to. I use flight attendants, for example. They are bloody fantastic on a phone, They've got such amazing customer service skills. And they've had to put up with some tough stuff in their careers. And a lot of them change over and come into the call centre or the contact centre purely because they now don't want to get on the planes any longer, and they want to stay at home with their kids, or a pandemic is hit, And those are skills that are so transferable. So always open communication, transferable skills, and people who are happy to learn.
That's great.
I would say that's always the most important.
Some very good lessons, very, very good ideas in terms of, I think, what can be imparted regardless of industry, regardless of whether it's BPO or whether it's captive. But Annelien, it has been absolutely fantastic chatting with you. Thanks for joining the CX Files, and we look forward to having you back soon.
Oh, well, thank you for having me and inviting me, and it was really a nice pleasure. For my first, that's for sure.
Well, definitely not your last.
Thanks for downloading the CX Files podcast. If you have a moment, please give us a star rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, because this really helps other people to find the podcast. If you have any suggestions for future guests, or ideas, people, or topics, then please just find myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan on LinkedIn and send a suggestion.